is João Diniz, and I've made the icon isometric tile set you've downloaded. And I'm making this video to help people use Tiled, which is the free software, to make maps with it. It's not always super intuitive, so I'm here to help. For those of you who have used the Lancer pack, some of these should be familiar, but there are a few small differences, especially when setting the tile size for the maps that we want to pay close attention to. So yeah, let's get this started. I also apologize if you hear any cicadas in the background. They're quite loud, but this time no noisy neighbors, so that's cool. So when you open Tile, it shouldn't look too different from this. I haven't updated in a while, but and the first thing we want to do is click here on new map, or you can go to file, new map. Shortcut Control N also works. So when we do a new map, we have a bunch of different options. We have orthogonal, which is like regular squares, top down Pokemon view. We have hexagonal, which we used in the Lancer pack. This time we're actually going to use isometric, which is a bit of a different beast. And although the tiles in the pack are 32 by 32, and usually we want to have like equal sizes, equal measurements in these options here for tile size, width, and height, usually we have it the same, right? Whether it is hexagonal or orthogonal. But here in isometric, especially in our case, the height is going to be half as big as the width. So we need to have it 32 by 60 here. This is crucial. This is what makes the layering work correctly. I wasn't able to make tile sets work with Tiled for the longest time because I couldn't figure this out. So this is the trick. And of course that means that like you can have, if you want to have say a 20 by 20 map, which is pretty big by icon standards, but if you're making, I don't know, game dev or something, you can have it even bigger. But like having the height twice as big as the width when it comes to the map size should make for a pretty alright experience, I guess is what I'm trying to say. So here we're going to click Save As. We can create any map. I'm going to save it here as tutorial map. I don't know. And then .tmx, that's the tiled file extension for map files. Okay, cool. So we have the map here. We've opened this up. But what do? We can do much. We can see the grid, which is fun. So down here on the lower right-hand corner, we have new tile set here in the tile sets folder. Or if you already have a tile set open, this blank page here with this star, you can see it also means new tile set. You can also click here if you don't have this button showing up. So when we click to create a new tile set, we can name whatever we want, Gooby Gaga, whatever. And then we're going to choose an image source, just like before. We're going to click Browse. We're going to have the isometric tiles. And here is where things get tricky yet again. Although the map needs to understand the tiles as 32 by 16, the tile set itself needs to be 32 by 32. Otherwise, it's going to get buggy. So yeah, this is also another point of confusion. You know, actually, let me show you what I mean by that. But also, we're going to use a transparent color. We need to do that. And we can click in this blank square here to pick a color from the image and just click any of the empty spaces. If we click a color by mistake, that color will be transparent, and then it will be a mask. We'll have like this huge mask. Things won't layer properly. So transparency is super important. And then we can save it as goobygaga.tsx. So tsx is the tile set extension. Those two are different, but tiled can read both. So that's good for us. The first thing that can be kind of disorienting if you're not used to the program is that when you create a new tile set, it's going to shoot you straight to the tile set property page. But you can go back to the map simply by seeing those tabs up here. And we are on gobigaga.tsx. We can go to tutorialmap.tmx, right? And here you can see that we can already pick one of the tiles. So it's kind of like a brush or a stamp. You can pick one of the tiles, apply it. And if we have something that's a little bit different, like that has a little bit of transparency, see, it's layering, nice. And all right, so we don't get any trouble that could potentially arise for whatever reason from improperly layering things. So now, just as an example of things that can go wrong, if you have the same image as a tile set, you know, I'm gonna pick the exact same image. I'm gonna name it wrong tile set just to show it what I mean. And I'm gonna leave it the tile height as the default from the system, the 16 pixels high measurement from the map that it's pulling from. And what happens here, you can see that there's like these lines dividing the tiles because it's reading each individual tiles as 2 tiles, and then it won't gel well with the map property. So like if we could just paint before, even with if we select both brushes and try to make it, it's buggy. It doesn't quite work out right. If you want some trippy effects, I guess it can be fun, but for most part of the time we want to have those options. Speaking of using a brush and a stamp, let's talk about the tools. So here we already have the stamp brush tool selected. It's also could be called a pencil or something, and it's the most basic one. You click on something and you draw with it, and there you have it. You're putting terrain down. The shortcut is B. If you've used other image processing software such as Photoshop or something, you probably used this shortcut. It also stands for brush. So there you go. And you can draw over stuff. But as you can see, everything now is one level, right? We aren't stacking the tiles yet for the famous isometric look. We'll get to that in a second. But let's take a look at the main tools we will be using. Tiled is a pretty powerful software, but we don't need all of those features. So sure, let's say I want to have some of this transparency around, and I messed up and I filled it. I can just click the eraser up here, shortcut E, and then, well, it erases. Not much new there, right? Also of use is this shape fill tool, shortcut P, maybe for polygon, and with it you can make like a square of tiles, right? That's also pretty nifty. But if you want to fill stuff even faster, then of course there is, I don't know, let me just change the tile here. There's the bucket fill tool, shortcut F, which is a little bit different from some other software options, but you know, F for fill maybe, and it will fill everything that's the same tile and it's connected. So even though this is also transparent, it's walled off. Otherwise, I can also change these into grass, into sand tiles. Whenever you have a brush, the brush stamp, and I think the fill tool as well selected, you can right click any of the tiles you've already placed as a eyedropper of sorts. You can change to that tile, which is nice. And it also works for the fill tool. So I mean, it should be working. Okay, I just didn't pick it up right. Right, so that's cool. That's awesome. We get a lot of nice things going. And I'm gonna construct this whole level. And yeah, so this is a nice field. It's isometric, all right. But to me, and the reason why I made this tile set, specifically thinking of icon, one of the greatest strengths isometric art has is like being able to portray height, right? Like a difference in how high things are. And for this, we'll need to use the layer tools in Tiled a lot more than we did with the Lancer tile pack. But if you did use the Lancer tile pack and you use some layering for, I don't know, tokens and stuff, it's pretty similar. Here up in the layer window, down here we have the same blank page with the star like we did for the tile set. This one means new layer. You click tile layer, and then you grab a tile, and lo and behold, it's like a second level, right? Like it's on the second floor. And if I try to put something else on it, it will just, you know, it won't create a new layer. So then again, I'll have to go and make another layer, right? And with these, you can stack things up infinitely. One thing to note, however, is because this is a pretty much free pack and it has some limitations, right? So if I put these grass tiles here on layer 2, you can like kind of easily see where they start and where they end because the bottom is all rock tiles. But as soon as I connect this with the bottom grass tiles, it's a little bit harder to understand like where this tile starts and where the other one ends. Like the levels get a little confused. One way you can fix that is of course by having different ground options around everything, and that will make things pop for sure. You know, like this is a lot easier to read. But what I like to do, at least with one layer, I don't have to do this with every layer, but you know, like this is really hard to, oops, this is layer 1. This is really hard to read, right, when it gets to certain points. So one feature Tiled has that we did not use with the Lancer tile pack, but we will use with this one, is the tint color option for layers. So I'm going to click here on tile layer 1, and that's the bottom layer, right? I can erase it so it's easy to see it's the bottom layer. And what I'm going to do is here on the left side of the screen, there's property. Maybe the tile layer will be closed. You can open it up. And right here, there's tint color not set. When you click not set, you're going to find the broom, which you can reset if you didn't like what happened, or these 3 dots where you can set a tint color for it. So what does this do is that it makes it kind of like it if it had a layer over it. So for instance, it goes from 255 to 255, right? So I'm going to use the RGB values just because, and I want it to be, you know, not that dark. So I'm going to have 220 on all of them. So I have a nice gray, a nice light gray. So now this layer is darker overall, and you can kind of see it a little bit better here on these tiles, what is upper level, what is lower level. If it is too subtle for you, you can make this number smaller, like 180 across the board, and it gets even darker, and you can see even better what is what. All of the example maps I've done for this use a tint in the bottom layer. I think it really makes things easier to see. I think it's a really good idea. And the reason why I didn't include, like, I could have darker tile variants in the pack, right? But what I like about having this tint option is that you can actually customize it yourself as you're using it. So this is a gray and everything is darker, which is nice, sure. But say that I want to have some sort of effect or a mood, and I want it to be, you know, like a cooler shade. Maybe there's some blue in there. Then I can make this all a little bit darker and increase the blue value, and everything now is a little bit bluer, a little bit darker. So it's a cooler shade, you know. I think this is more flexible than just having one darker color variation or having to make I don't know, warmer or cooler color variations, I can also make warmer options here just by swapping these values. And now it's more of an afternoon kind of map, right? So yeah, I think this is good for you. So if you're using this as a mapping tool mostly, you're probably pretty much done by now. I don't like having holes like this in my tiles, so I would probably fill it. What else? Oh, we do have half-size tiles and wall tiles, half height and kind of half width as well, like this. And they work lovely, but they don't stack really nicely atop each other because they kind of like would stack where the top would be. So I would recommend only using this when you know you're done with that level. And this is less of a problem with the wall tiles, like this, and you can have the corner tiles and whatnot. You can also always press X. This is important. Press X and Y to flip tiles. We'll mostly only be using X in isometric. We won't be using Y a lot. But some tiles I forgot to mirror. But you can always just flip them with X. So that's fun. You know, and these tiles are less of a problem, right? You can imagine there's a corridor here. It doesn't have the same issue as floating as the half height tiles do. But once you start stacking these as well, you know, you also will have a harder time going back to regular size stuff, you know. I mean, it's not terrible. It works. But I just watch out for those special edge cases and edge scenarios. And this is pretty much how you need to use the tileset proper. If you want to, you can also use object layer to place characters, but this is hardly a thing in both game dev and like paper TTRPG maps or VTTs. You want to have your objects separate from the map, right? But if for whatever reason you want to have a cool mock-up like I did, right? You can create a tile set based on the tokens that I am still going to organize for the back, but sure, let's make one from the Imperial troops. And it needs to be 32 by 32, don't forget that. And now we have the Imperial troop tile set, which is cool. You know, like I can create a tile layer and I can place these little guys around. But when you create a tile layer, you're kind of locked to the grid. You know, like you can see that the characters are always locked to the grid. And sometimes that means they aren't always entirely centered on each tile. The easiest way to fix that is to create a new layer, but instead of creating a tile layer, you create an object layer. So the object layer does all sort of things, but what we really want to focus on is the insert tile option up here. You can see that the tools from the tile layer are grayed out, but the insert tile shortcut T option allows us to put these tiles like out of the grid anywhere we want, right in the middle of like an intersection, whatever, you know, we can do pretty much wherever you want when you're placing objects, if this is something you want to do. And last but not least, let's talk about exporting options. So here on file, you can go as in export as image. To export an image, you can set up a path, you can choose browse. Of course, we usually only include visible layers, right? And then there are a few different options. Use current zoom level allows you to export things if they're zoomed at their zoom level, right? So right now in the lower right hand corner here, you can see we have 200%. That means we're zoomed in 2 times over. So if we use current zoom level, it will export it as 2 times as big as their actual tile and map sizes. This at 4 or 8 times, like 400 or 800%, is probably what you want to do if you're using it for VTTs, because these softwares are kind of expecting bigger images and they might have smoothing filters for very small resolution stuff like pixel art, which can kind of ruin the whole look. And if you're using it for game dev, you're probably wanting to have it in the original size because it's a lot smaller. Pixel art can save a lot of size, so you don't use current zoom level. You can draw the tile grid if you want. And then if you don't include the background, which I never do, you have a transparent background. Everything that's gray is going to be transparent. So you can do what I did and bring it over to image editing software and add, I don't know, gradients or skyboxes or whatever sort of bells and whistles you want at the background. But that's not really tiled talk. So I think this concludes it for this tutorial. I hope this was easy to understand. Last time I thought it was a little bit too long, so I'm trying to speed things along a little bit. But I might have been too fast, so let me know if you have any doubts. Let me know if this helped you. You can reach me out on Twitter at Jaowitha with a tilde, JAOWITHATILDE. You can also find me on Instagram at Ilustrajao, ILUSTRAJAO. And I'll try to help you guys as much as I can. I hope this pack is useful, and I guess that's it for this video. Thanks, and see you on the internet.